This is our animation project. So first we're going to start off with the structure of phospholipids. So you have a phosphate group, you have a glycerol, and you have a saturated fatty acid as well as an unsaturated fatty acid. And the head of the phospholipid is going to be hydrophilic, while the tail is going to be hydrophobic. So in a plasma membrane, these phospholipids will orient themselves so that the heads are facing the aqueous interior and exterior, and the tails will stay on the inside because they are hydrophobic. Now we're going to show a little bit different view of the cell membrane and also discuss the other different molecules that are involved. So there are two different types of proteins that are involved with the cell membrane, and those are embedded proteins and surface proteins. So an embedded protein would be like the channel protein on the diagram, which actually goes through the lipid bilayer. Embedded proteins will usually help with transport of materials in and out of the cell. And a surface protein is a protein that solely interacts with the surface. So it would be like that peripheral protein at the side. There are also glycoproteins, which attach to the surface. Similarly to glycolipids, they both help maintain stability and facilitate cellular recognition. So this is just a different view of the membrane, but there's also cholesterol, which gives the cell membrane support by limiting mobility, because all of these molecules that make up the membrane, they are constantly moving in what is called the fluid mosaic model, and the cholesterol just helps limit some of that mobility and keep the membrane stable. Because the interior of the membrane is nonpolar and hydrophobic, usually only nonpolar and hydrophobic small molecules can pass easily through, like O2 and CO2. Larger molecules or charged ions will usually need some kind of aid to get through. So water usually can osmose through the cell membrane slowly, even though it's polar because it's so small. However, there's a special channel protein called an aquaporin that helps transport water more quickly through the membrane. The cell wall is a structure only found in plant cells that provides strength and support to the cell and also controls the direction of growth. Passive transport is a type of membrane transport that does not require any energy. So this usually involves the movement of particles from high concentration to low concentration, and when those particles are water, it's called osmosis. So sorry the title is wrong, but this is actually still passive transport. So another form of passive transport is called facilitated diffusion, which involves a channel protein just providing a pathway so that substances can travel along their concentration gradient. So now this is actually active transport. So active transport will require ATP as energy to power it. So an example would be the sodium-potassium pump. So the first step in the pump is that we have a pump in the membrane which has a high affinity for sodium, and it will bind 3 particles of sodium to the inside of it. So binding these sodium ions actually causes the pump to hydrolyze or break down ATP. And the sodium ions are also released into the extracellular environment. So one phosphate group from the ATP will attach to the pump, and ADP will be released as a byproduct. So now that it has a phosphate group, the pump will change shape and now has an affinity for potassium ions. So 2 of the potassium ions will attach to the inside of the pump, and the phosphate group will be removed. So the loss of the phosphate group will cause the pump to, after releasing the potassium ions to the inside of the cell, obviously, the pump will change shape back into its original affinity for sodium, and the cycle will repeat. Larger molecules usually require ATP to transfer through the membrane because they are large, so they usually can't pass through easily.